time this? Yes, this na time for all Salon people and them party them. Sarah Jem Media will be bringing you a variety of programs ranging from documentaries to discussions, interviews, news, views, sports, and entertainment. Our programs will contain matters on development, governance, the economy, and issues that are of importance to Sierra Leone. So, no left BNO because we get Beberebe program then like Salon discussion, meets the ministers, the president's hour, and the Gladi program. Look me, I look you. All this they start soon na www.sarahjemmedia.org. Now who's tem these?
When I was young, a lot of things were different. Unfortunately, most of the differences seen now are heartbreaking and are not good at all.
Before now, men were strong protectors of the weak, fathers, brothers, lovers, sons. Their mere presence guaranteed the safety of women and children.
But what do we do now?
Men harassing and raping women.
Men sexually abuse little girls.
Men battering and killing their wives.
Any form of sexual assault, be it rape, sexual abuse, or pedophilia, is a killer to human self-esteem.
Women should stop dying in silence. Speak now.
The rapist should be stigmatized, not the victim.
I think death sentence should be the consequence of such terrible act.
And you mothers, build confidence in your children, put trust in them, listen to them when they make reports, and take necessary actions.
Talking of mothers before now, women were virtuous.
They were mothers, daughters, and sisters.
Nurturing, counseling, supporting their men folks.
But now,
women are trafficking female children for money. Women are forced to be silenced.
All this must stop, and it must stop now.
Real men do not abuse, rape, or molest women and children. It is barbaric, unacceptable.
Let all real men stand with us.
Together, let's say an emphatic no to rape, sexual abuse, pedophilia, and domestic violence.
Hello, my name is Josephine Kamara. I'm the founder of You Can Do It Foundation. You Can Do It Foundation is a charitable organization based in Sierra Leone, West Africa. You Can Do It Foundation has been in existence for the past 2 years. We have been fighting gender-based violence against women and girls within the community. During the past 2 years, we have been offering psychosocial support, counseling, court fee, medical fee, including school items to the survivors of gender-based violence. However, during the lockdown of COVID-19, report received and confirmed that rape cases among a minor has increased tremendously within our community. Because of this, You Can Do It Foundation has secured the land to build an accommodation for the survivors of rape. However, this may almost become impossible without your generous support. We need your help to build this home for the survivors. Your help could be in cash or in kind. If you wish to join us to make a difference in a child's life, please go to our website, which is www.youcandoitcyf.org, or you can go to our GoFundMe page, which is Home of Hope for the survivors of gender-based. Or you can contact us with the details at the end of this video. We thank you greatly for your generous support, and thank you once more for making a difference in a child's life.
When I was a kid growing up in Sierra Leone, my neighbor had a small TV. The television was beaming these images about famine, war, about diseases.
There was a silent majority suffering.
I am fed up with that kind of news. We can use culture and art to change mind and hearts and inspire action.
I was here as a student, and of course Charlie was my teacher.
I've asked him to join me on the journey to create a major new play to offer hope to our people.
We want to uplift our nation, leave legacy for our children.
We are talking about national pride.
This is big, man. This has great magnitude. Sometimes I feel afraid. I feel terrified when I think of the project.
Tito! What's here, Tito?
We are nowhere near waiting one for day.
I want this, I want it, I want it.
I want this thing for succeed, Koji.
This place fail and die.
Is this a curse or what?
People like you that makes Sierra Leone the way it is.
You cannot give me blow, but you know when you cannot give me blow.
Oh man, just did lie, blame. These are the things that have wrecked this country.
We need to move this nation forward. We're going to need to pledge a better future.
I can call it my second to last project. We died at the last. Rest assured, my brother.
Silverstone Beats. People killing, people dying, children hurting, hear them crying. You can practice what you preach, or would you turn the other cheek? Father, 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 help us, send some guidance from above. People got me questioning, where is the love?
See this life we live, we all have to give, yeah. Cause all I see is evil, and too much killing of my people, yeah. So let's bless one another, yeah. So let's help one another. I sing again, yeah.
What's me, I don't see this kind of thing where they happen. This not for be education opportunity. Now in we need, let we learn for the share, not to all time for big greed.
You see this life, the live, is it where you lose or we know? Stop killing one another, let's stand together, yeah. Stop playing the hero, looking at each other like we're zero. On the block with a C, money they can make every day pan pre, yeah.
R.I.P. They took our boys, they take our joy, This time the time we stop now crime. Don't blind by this life, your future.
Stop the stabbing, stop the killing. Let's love one another. Peace.
Where is the I see fighting every day. day. I see dying every day. Why don't we help each other and pave the way for a better life, a life that we all deserve? Instead of killing each other, why don't we preserve? So you wanna be a bad man, he's gonna be a badder man. You got a big knife, he's gonna get a bigger knife. Our people suffered for years in chains. Now we turn on each other, cut for gains. For the ones that send the youth to kill themselves, you pretend to be a father figure but only care for yourself. You are nothing but the flesh of the devil. You're evil, low life on another level. Think about the mothers and the pain they go through. You don't care for these kids, they mean nothing to you. But karma only knows the boomerang maneuver. One day the Green Reaper will be your remover.
This little deranged ranting of some sanctimonious food is as poetic verses, ruminate a prophecy given to a sentient dude. So I say it's as it is for you to listen and deduce the wisdom that's gonna liberate and galvanize you. Under the sun ain't nothing new, that for black on black crimes and breaking news. Under the sun ain't nothing new.
You gotta stand up for what you believe in. Gotta stand up for what is right. 'Cause if you got me, then I've got you too. Regardless of what you've been through, even when you're feeling new. Where is the love? Do this if we try. There's no time to waste, no time. Together forever, whatever the weather. Us as a unit working together.
See, I did not love done, but me heart still not tongue. God don't lift me up, but me heart still not run. You will never go far if you don't know where you're from. So I don't do it for myself, I'ma do it for the young. Plead to my brothers, let's do it for the youngers. Why spend a bag on a jumper? Back where you're from, people dying with hunger. With people then they suffer. You then I you the bluff, it's copper. You're the game, need for change. Like we not get up. Where's the love? Where's the love, yo? Where's the love? I said,
where is the love? Little youth, let's take time. Stop all the knife and the gun crime. Think of the future, paint that picture. Get a youth in the future. Peace gonna rain on we. Peace gonna rain on we. Yeah.
Let's stop the violence and come together. Get rid of knives and guns and bombs. Let's be together. Pray peace and love, golden hope through storm and weather. See what is going on. Where is the love?
Tell me, how do you feel when you see your brothers and sisters lying down the street helplessly? And what will you do if you die today and find yourself in hell?
I want to ask you this. Look inside your eyes and answer me with all the truth. Where you get whose side the love day?
When I left. Boku man them get nef. If you live by the nef, you go suffer. You know get sense, you know sabi say nef not for butter. Stabbing guys, yeah that's uncool. When it comes to knives, yeah I'm anti. What happened to fighting guys with your hands, G? When you stab a man, it's not one man you stab. Just remember that you stab a whole family.
People killing, people dying, children hurt and hear them crying. You can practice what you preach, or you will turn the other cheek. Father, 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 help us, send some guidance from above. People got me questioning, where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love? The love, the love. Where is the love? Where
alone, say yeah. Then say then say so good in the morning, the land is just gloomy, the moon is going, the cloud is forming, the cocks are crowing, dew is falling, the birds are coming, everybody running inside Switzerland today. The land is yummy, see the mommy they cooking fufu, the party smoking cigarettes, Rajo they watch baby musu, we they find out the country rest, right in West Africa, on the Atlantic Ocean. Inside this land, so much I can boast of. Look at the good plantation, from the beach I get meditation. Make me not wear this nation, I get L-O-V-E for me alone. Yeah, for me alone. Love for me alone, sweet alone. What a beautiful love. We fall like unto the bone, cause if it went, whose side we go, sweet alone. What a beautiful love. We fall like unto the bone, cause if it well, whose side we go, everybody missing well done. If we all this country so strong, everybody missing stand up. If you like salon, say yeah. Then say then say
L-O-V-E-C, where love was an L-O place where sweet like gold. We got diamond box, I silver and gold. So that we make count for the young and old. I mean for let we serve, help we serve. Also you come for the bars, you want for put chest. Peace, love and unity, now ain't for put first. Cause the jealousy and watch or that don't make sense. Togetherness is one, but wait for we success. So get up and go walk, I sit down for the top. I criticize the government just for mix up. But stack on the pace, so we need for put stop. Life for hustle for you all, no matter how you struggle the bone. This life without pain, not easy, not in the zone. Just forget to live in home, myself can go slow. We like to say I go, I never forget but this home.
Sweet alone, what a beautiful love. We fall like unto the bone, cause if it well, whose side we go, sweet alone. What a beautiful love. We fall like unto the bone, cause if it well, whose side we go, everybody missing well done. If we all this country so strong, everybody missing stand up. If you like salon, say yeah. Then say we all remember say, sweet alone how we each and every one God take care of his own. We all remember say, this country now we each and every one for take care of us alone. I will exalt thee, realm of the free. Great is the love where I get for salon. I got enough trunk of one for maintain this my land. No matter the situation, I get love for salon. I got enough every day, no day pamphlet. Blessing up picking go school, make it go land the boo. I don't owe me all like farmer, put the country pattern for any attack. Me the way me boo. I got enough every day, no day pamphlet. Blessing up picking go school, make it go land the boo. I don't owe me all like farmer, put the country pattern for any attack. Me the way me boo. Sweet alone, what a beautiful love. We fall like unto the bone, cause if it well, whose side we go, sweet alone. What a beautiful love. We fall like unto the bone, cause if it well, whose side we go, everybody missing well done. If we all this country so strong, everybody missing stand up. If you like salon, say yeah.
Hello and welcome to another day edition of Sarah J Media Live on YouTube and Facebook. And I want to say welcome to viewers. Then today is another day, another program, one of our impromptus on a Tuesday. So definitely, and also now I'll be expectful if we get something on Wednesday. Well, as we always say in the past, follow us, like our page, so you'll be prompt when we get to one of our unusual days of doing our program live on the Sarah J Media platform on YouTube and Facebook. I know we've had a very busy weekend since Friday, or the week before Friday. We had a long day of viewing the Queen's laying out at Westminster. And that event, they don't come, they don't pass. The burial was on Monday, a very hectic Monday, and everybody was busy, glued onto their television screen, watching the whole process of the funeral of the Queen, which took roughly about maybe 12 or more hours, because it was a whole day event, and it ends around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening. But not saying that, we've seen a lot of dignitaries coming to the UK, participating and giving their final farewell to the Queen. People from the Commonwealth, people from other parts of the Commonwealth, as in the European part of the Commonwealth, Canada, and other parts of the world. We've seen world leaders from France, America, and other title of the hierarchy of kingship from Spain and other parts of the world as well. But not saying that, we also have our own local communities and our own local dignitaries who attended the funeral. And it was a graceful funeral, and that is beyond a befitting funeral. And the whole nation and the whole world have gave the Queen their final farewell, and it was well granted, well attended, and I think the entire nation was glued onto their screen for a minimum of 5 or 6 hours, just going through the process of the funeral. May her soul continue to rest in peace. But as they say, when somebody passed away, we mourn, we cry, and we move on, because life is about moving on. We will not forget the loss, and we'll make sure that she will ever be remembered as the on earth. It is a good thing for us to be alive to see the day that she was buried, and we've now come into ushering in a new monarchy with the King. Well, some of us have met him in the past, some of us haven't, and for those who have met him in the past, they'll be very happy within themselves now to say, I met the King when he wasn't the King. Just like those who met the Queen before she became the Queen and during her reign as the Queen. But now we're going into a new era of being part of the kingship in the UK, which possibly some people thought they will never be able to see. But we are very lucky to be part of that. But that's not just a small gist about the kingship, the queenship, and all the burial process of everything that happened during the past couple of days. But today is another day. At the Sarah J Media platform, we always come with something different, and different things will always happen on our platform. I know say people and they wait now for you for see what thing happen. Whether they invite you or they not invite you, whether you come or you not come. We've seen a lot of videos, a lot of pictures, a lot of things that we don't see, it don't happen. But today I am going to be driving the ship alone. But I'm quite happy to be on board alone, because I have the privilege to be in the midst of our own. You know, see what I can do near woman them, I can smile a lot, I can talk a lot, I can also talk some kind nice way so that people will be glued on what in people they talk about. Anyway, today is another day, and we do an exclusive profile interview of one of our own, a very popular, a very well-known, a highly celebrated young woman. In name alone means a lot. For those who know who the person is, that name belongs to a remarkable person within our own culture back in Sierra Leone, who has done exemplary well within the entertainment industry. She was well known within Sierra Leone, well known in Liberia, and well known in West Africa. She became a national African icon in her prime. And guess what? Somebody was named after her. Somebody who looks like her, pretty like her, and has a lot more than what we might be expecting of this wonderful woman. But the person we have today is somebody who has been a former director of policy and research at the Institute of Public Policy Research. Wow. And later on, she was a political advisor to the leader of the opposition and led on the development of policies ranging from devolution to local economic growth, housing, energy, and climate, including transport. This is a person that also spent 8 years at senior levels in the Cabinet Office in the UK, including as head of the city's policy unit. Wow. I think we have somebody who's going to tell us a lot about what happens within the UK parliamentary sector of what we possibly don't have opportunity to know about because some of us are not active UK politicians. So it is going to be a massive opportunity for us today. And she was also responsible for driving forward the government's economic devolution agenda in England. Prior to this, she was deputy director at the Prime Minister's Strategy Unit, leading on localism and local economic growth for number 10 Downing Street. What a credential, and what a huge bunk of experience. Today, in our midst, we have none other than our own Miatta Fahnbuleh. Welcome to the program, Miatta, and tell viewers who you are, and tell us a little bit about what makes you to become the Miatta Fahnbuleh that we possibly don't know that we are going to know today. Over to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited about this conversation. I hope this is going to be the first of many conversations. You sort of read out my credentials, but I think it's important to put the backstory behind that credential. So I'm Sierra Leonean. My mom's side of the family is Sierra Leonean. My dad's side of the family is Liberian. And we moved here when I was 5. We had to leave West Africa because the politics was difficult for us. So we had to leave, and we had to leave pretty quickly. And that was a big wrench for my parents because they never imagined they would settle in this country. Home was home, and that's where they always thought it would be. But, you know, life threw a different course for them. And they knew when they came here that the one thing they had to do was set us up. They knew that they would make any sacrifice, like every single family that comes here, to try to give us the best shot in this country that isn't particularly meritocratic. It's not, it's stacked up against a lot of people, and it's stacked up particularly against Black people that come here and try and make it home. So they did everything. They made a lot of sacrifices. But the one thing they made sure that we knew is it wasn't enough. Whatever we do, whatever we achieve, we have a duty to try to lift other people up. And I look back, you know, at the kids I grew up with, good kids from good families. You know, I've made my own journey. I've got to where I have, but a lot of kids that were as talented as me, that had as much potential as me, haven't managed to find the same path. And for me, that's not because of those kids. That's because the system let them down. That's because the system was stacked against them. And changing that has been the thing that's motivated me. So when I was thinking about what I do next, I was always clear that I wanted to go into the space where I could try to drive change so that I could use the path that I'd gone on in order to help others that will come after me go on a similar path. And that's always been the driver. So when I got into government, the thing I was trying to do was think about how do we change the economy? How do we make things work for my community? How do we make things work for people? And I learned a lot from that. But the biggest thing I learned was actually change is possible. With political will, change is possible. And we can change things pretty quickly if you can align the politics and you can get yourself organized. And that stayed with me. And throughout my career, I've always tried to come up with ideas about how we can make the economy work for people and how we can make the economy work for my community. And I do it from experience. I do it because my parents taught me that I had a duty to not just do okay, but to make sure that I was working for the generations that would come behind after me, but also my community. And that's kind of the thing that has taken me to this point in my career.
Okay, that's great. Before we get into your career a bit, let's talk about when you were like a child growing up in West Africa. What was it like for you at that particular point in time? I know you left when you were age 5, but what are some of the memories that you can bring back to reality going back 5 years before you left West Africa?
So for me, family. And, you know, we've got a big network and a big community here, but I remember family. I remember every weekend just being surrounded by, you know, everyone's your auntie, by being surrounded by your aunties and your aunties and your aunties and your cousins. And all my memories are punctuated by just having households of people, or being able to walk down the street and you are embraced by family. And I think certainly when I remember, you know, we went to Paris before we settled here, and I remember as a child that big difference where you feel quite isolated in a community versus feeling like you've got that family around you. The second thing is I remember the food. I remember that well, but we've taken that with us. And I remember, you know, in both Liberia and Sierra Leone, we lived with, you know, my grandmas in each place. And so the structure around that is something that's just sort of stayed with me. I can remember little things like every night sitting with my grandma and praying, and she made sure we did that every single day so that we'd always had that protection around us. And then my final remember is being caned a lot. I remember being in school and getting the whip. And you remember that?
That will never go past any African child, for sure. We know that for sure. But what are some of the cultural challenges that you face coming into the UK with that lengthy background of you having a family network? Was it like the same in terms of cultural differences coming over here, looking at the way they deal with their own family setting? What was the kind of differences that you face?
Yeah, so I think there are two that I would point to. So we first went to Paris before we came to London, and part of the reason we left Paris, and this stayed, you know, I was young, I didn't really understand, but this stayed with me. And there was a much smaller West African community in Paris, and certainly a much smaller Sierra Leonean community, Liberian community. And I remember the cultural difference was huge, and it sort of imprinted in me. And it had a racial component as well, because Paris then was as a young kid, it felt racist. And I remember, you know, one of the memories in my head was going to school and, you know, the teacher not really sort of paying attention because, you know, I was a black kid in the school. And I remember one day my parents were a bit late and my dad sort of came to pick me up, and, you know, I'd had to put my coat on myself, but I barely knew how to do it. And I was sort of crying because, I don't know, the teacher had done something or said something. I think that was at that point that they were like, this is not the place for us. We need to move somewhere where we've got the community, we've got the network. And so coming here, there was two experiences, because we came into, you know, a community that was already here, and we had the networks and we had family. And so part of home was brought here, but that was very, very different to the experience, you know, in other parts of, you know, my neighborhood, where, you know, in truth, the family network is much smaller, much smaller. And you don't have that connection, and you don't have, you know, the extended family that wraps its arms around you and provides childcare and provides support in the community. And I could see both. But actually that experience of seeing both also makes you value. You know, I learned the value of community. I learned the value of solidarity. I learned the value of leaning on others' shoulders and other leaning on you, and you trying to walk forward together. And I think that has always stayed with me.
It's very good that you've learned the differences between those two cultures and how you manage it as a young child growing up in a community where you don't feel like you belong. And I know that is one of the driving forces that made you become who you are today. I know now you're a grown-up woman in the UK, you've gone through your primary, secondary school education, you're now going into university. What are some of the challenges do you think you were given an open opportunity to achieve what you wanted to achieve, even though you still have that maybe color barrier in terms of your race, in terms of where you're coming from, in terms of gender? What are some of the things that you face going into your higher education?
Yeah, so I mean, I think two things. I remember in school, and I always remember this, and it was a report card from my, teacher. And I was smart, I worked hard, but I wasn't necessarily the smartest, but I always could have worked hard. And the teacher sort of made a comment along the lines of, she tries, but she's not going to amount to that much. I paraphrase, but it was kind of that. And I remember reading it and being really hurt by it. But my reaction was determination to prove that person wrong, rather than right, to prove them wrong. And I think that is something that has always been there. I feel like you have to work that much harder because you are a woman and you are a Black woman. And so, I was really clear. My teachers were like, "Oh, I'm not sure." I had to say, I think I want to try to go to Oxford. The teachers encouraged some of the other students to think about it. No one came to me and said, you should think about it. And I said, well, look, I want to have a go. I want to try. I was told, oh, well, I'm not sure you'll get the grades for it. And I said, well, look, I'll prove you wrong. But always feeling you've got to work that bit harder to get to where you want to without the expectation that there will be an encouragement. And actually times there was not, overt discouragement, but just a disbelief that you could do that. So you're always feeling like you're going to have to break boundaries to back yourself. And then you walk into a space, and I remember, going to university, and you have to prove yourself every day. You have to work that bit harder it's almost earned the right to walk to be in the space. And if I think about, some of my, friends and colleagues, there was an assumption, they'd go in with their posh voices and their backgrounds and they're entitled, and there was a sense that they belonged there. Whereas I always felt like I had to walk in and make it very clear to people that I deserve to be here as much as you, create the space for me. But that doesn't go away. You just get used to it, and you get used to your sort of tactics to make sure that people know you have a right to be in that space. And they need to clear the space for you to be heard and for you to talk and for you to have a presence. But that is something that actually at every stage was definitely there when I went into university, with all the insecurities you go into, because you're still finding yourself, you're still trying to discover your place, and find the confidence to believe that you should be where you should be.
Right. I know going to Oxford is possibly one of your career path, breathing ground of what you actually going to become in the future. We had another person who was also a graduate from Oxford, and his experiences were quite different in terms of him being a man, and at the same time people look up to him like, oh, what are you doing here as a Black man within our community? And what you were studying also was a bit of a challenge. So they try to get him to fit into certain areas that they think he belonged. Just like possibly you must have gone through that. What sort of areas were you being directed to say, well, okay, this is where you belong, even though this is what you're capable of doing, but were they trying to redirect your career path because they think you don't belong among their own society? What were some of the areas that they were pushing you into?
Yeah, I mean, so, there are not that many Black female economists. If you think about our screens, you think about the experts that are rolled, and there's a reason for that. There is always a sense that you'll do the softer things, and actually you have to be very clear. But I was always clear in my head because I knew what my purpose was, and my purpose was to try to change things for so others would have a better time than the kids that I grew up with and my generation. And so it was always clear that the economy was the thing that we needed to kind of fix. But that's a world where actually it's not particularly diverse. It's not accessible. It's not inviting. You're bulldozed by pseudoscience. It's very obscure. And then you walk into a space where your role models are all middle-aged white men broadly. And again, you know, that was a very clear desire for mine, but I had to earn the right to do that. And I had to kind of prove myself and make it very clear that I had as much claim to be doing that and be in that space and have a voice and challenge, because some of the assumptions behind economics are actually very cultural. The idea of individuals operating completely selflessly like there is no society actually doesn't make any sense in any world. But it certainly doesn't make sense if you come from our culture where actually community, family, the wider unit, the wider network is so entrenched. It's actually completely countercultural and counterintuitive. Right. So the ability to sort of challenge the assumptions that sit underneath our economics was definitely something that I built the muscle to do. Let's put it like that.
I know you mentioned family involvement in terms of the cultural background behind what you wanted to do. And I know most of our parents would like us to be lawyers, doctors, not even scientists, but lawyers, doctors, business entrepreneurs and all that stuff. What was sort of the kind of support that she had from your close family network for you to be able to be an economist? Do you think that they encourage you a lot more, or you think they were saying to you, Miatta, we don't think this is possible for you because one, you're black, two, you're a woman. How are you going to fit yourself into this category of what you want to do? Because like you said, economists are mainly male-dominated in that particular field. So what sort of family support did you get from your family for you to be encouraged to say, okay, this is what you want to do, we'll give you all the support, go ahead? What was it like around that time?
Yeah, so, you know, credit to my parents. The one thing they said is, don't go into politics, fail. But other than that, they instilled in us that we could do anything. You know, the two things I will always be grateful to my parents for is they told us that we could do anything. We just had to work hard for it. We just had to be determined for it. And they instilled in us that never let your color be a barrier. Never let anyone tell you can't do something because of your color. In fact, you almost have to train yourself not to walk into a room and not see color, so that you see everyone as an equal and you stand as an equal and you hold your ground. And they drilled that into us from a really young age. So I feel really lucky. They always drove us, you know, other than the sort of stay away from politics bit of advice.
That one,
they were always, you know, hugely encouraging and inspiring, and they also let us find our own way. They, you know, me and my brother ended up doing very different things. If my older brother who passed away had lived, no doubt he'd be doing something very different. So they didn't steer us, but they made us believe that we could do anything, but we had to be determined, we had to be resilient, and we had to work hard.
Wow, it's good that you have this sort of family network supporting you in terms of what you want to do, because some parents will have turned around to say, oh, Miatta, you don't have to do this because you'll not be able to have job opportunities here. You'll not be able to survive here because it's a male-dominated area of profession. You have to do something else. But I think what they told you not to do is what your final drive was kicking towards, which is the political side of things. And I know that is one thing that many African parents don't like their daughters to do. And we all know the reason why, because of the kind of challenges surrounding that particular career. So now you became an economist in the UK, and I think you became an economist in the UK when the challenges of the community, of the atmosphere, when it comes to economic development, was worsened during the COVID era, and so many things has happened within the financial state of what we call the UK today. What are some of the things that you actually started to look at when you actually qualified and became an economist on your own, and you begin to look at the open space of what you can do to deliver some of your expertise in some of these areas? What are your priorities in your field when you started?
Yeah, so, I mean, I actually started in economic development. I actually always thought that I would end up going back home, that I would work in development, because the way I saw it was very simple. We have a global economy that is stacked against the many, and the worst and sharpest end of that is felt across Africa, across the global south, and actually that's where I should put my energy. So I trained as an economist to go into economic development. I never actually thought I would end up working on UK domestic policy. That was almost by accident, because I had the chance to go and work in the Prime Minister's Strategy Unit, and I wanted to go and see what good practice looks like, so I could take it back to development. And then I got the bug and I stayed on. Although I do imagine I will go back to development. But the root for me was, there is something about the way that we've designed the system that means that a handful of people in the context of the kind of the global population are doing all right. And then the majority of people are not doing so great. And then a big chunk of people are being absolutely hammered. And this cannot be right. This cannot be right. And so I started it from the view of the division between the global south and the developed world. And then actually, as you drill down into a particular country, it's the same pattern that's replicated. So when I started to look at UK economics and politics, it was very clear. Our system, if you're doing okay, our system backs you, and it means that you continue to do okay.
Okay.
For everyone in the middle and everyone at the bottom, it doesn't work for us. And so a big part of the work I did was, well, how do we rewire the economy? How would we change the rules of the economy so that it actually does the job of lifting living standards? And once you start there, that will take you to things like, well, how do we create better jobs that pay people? How do we create the sort of what I call the social settlement, the things that as a citizen in any country, you should say, these are the core foundational things that we should have a right to as a citizen, that gives you the foundation, and then you can build from that. If you don't give people that, it's not a level playing field. So that your ability, if you're talented and you're smart and you can do things, to get on, if you don't have decent housing, if you don't have good education, if you don't have healthcare when you need it, those core foundational things, for me, should be the hallmark of any society. And time again, we see that broken and fractured. And then we question and wonder why people can't get ahead and get on. So for me, that was a second bit. And then, I entered climate actually from a kind of social justice perspective. I wasn't an environmentalist. I've sort of come to that down the track, but I was like, this thing that's coming, it's killing our people. And the pain of climate change will be felt first and foremost in Africa. It's being felt now, it'll be felt in the global south. And we've got to act, we're not acting. And so increasingly, my economics took economic and social justice that has to come hand in hand with environmental justice. And actually, if you bring the two together, you begin to see the seeds and the foundation of what could be a very different type of economic settlement. And for me, that is the thing that I'm fighting for. And I'm fighting for it because it matters to people here and now, but it matters for my kids' generation and my grandkids' generation. And the pain, if we don't get it right, the impact if we don't get it right will be felt by the people that can least afford to feel it. So if you care at all about social justice, or you care at all about compassion in other people, this is what it drives you to.
So do you think politicians in the whole like the idea of bringing the normality to social justice in terms of creating the sustainable environment for people who cannot afford that much to be able to survive? Do you think they are more or less open to that sort of judgment, or they kind of pull and hold back so that people will be in their own way of controlling the mechanism of how people should live and how they shouldn't live? Do you think politicians like playing that sort of game around the citizens, or it's just the reality of what the economic structure is?
So I think it's a bit of both. I think certainly what I can see is there is a particular economic structure, and it requires quite visionary and bold thinking to try to dismantle that. And actually, for a lot of people who are in politics and then the day-to-day of politics and the short-term cycle of politics, taking on that fight is not necessarily something they want to take on. And then you get vested interests. You know, the system works for certain people. There are people who are doing incredibly well out of the system, and they're organized and they have money, and they are connected. And so often there is no incentive in order to try and dismantle the thing that a lot of people are doing very well out of. And it's the people that will have power and access. So you're talking about, you know, a massive disruption in power, and it takes a brave politician to want to take that on.
So what do you think affects the world economy most? Is it global warming or economic disasters in developing countries? What do you think affects the world economy most among those two?
So I think it's a combination of both. I think economic shocks, so like the one that we're seeing now, will be the big driver. You know, so for most people who are thinking about today, next week, next month, next year, it is about the here and now. And when we get these crises that come, they are the thing that will drive what's happening in the global economy. And why they matter is where we don't have resilience, where we don't have those foundations. So if you take an economy that is already struggling and then you throw in this shock, it's catastrophic. It's catastrophic for the people in that economy. And so that is paramount. But what I would say is increasingly that's intersecting with climate. And increasingly, you know, what we will see over the course of the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years is the shocks, the crises that are going to be impacting on our communities will be climate related. And so for me, the job is, how do we deal with the here and now? How do we deal with the big issues that are coming, whether that is the pandemic and COVID, which is a massive knock to our economy, or that is the energy crisis that we're seeing now, which is impacting on all countries, or the crisis that's coming out of the war in Ukraine that's having an impact on food and grain prices across the world. How do we deal with these short-term hits that come in a way that also builds our resilience for the long term? And unfortunately, often in policymaking and in politics, we deal with the here and now. You know, if we think about the pandemic response, which is phenomenal, we did a lot of stuff that cushioned us in that moment, but not necessarily things that built our resilience to the next crisis that come. And I think we're just in a turbulent time where we're going to see more and more of these big shocks. And we've got to start responding to the short term in a way that builds our ability to have some resilience against future shocks when they come.
So it's basically building an economic resilience just in case you don't know about what is coming within the next couple of years or years to come.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So now I know you were the chief executive for New Economics Foundation. What are some of the basic priorities of setting up that sort of organization in terms of changing the economic platform of day-to-day lives of people living within the UK and other parts of the world?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's worth saying that the organization's been around for 30 years. So I've been there for 5 and running it for 5. But its roots came out of a movement that looked at the economic system and actually was a response to the World Economic Forum and it wanted to create an alternative that said, actually, this thing that we're doing where we are obsessed with wealth creation for the few, where it is all about economic growth and we don't ask ourselves who benefits from this growth, where we are putting the interest of, if you like, the machine of the economy above the interest of the people who the economy should serve. It came out of that. And we've sort of over 30 years been at the forefront of trying to both argue that the economy doesn't work for people and our planet, that we need a different kind of model and come up with ideas about what that should look like. In my time, the thing that I was really clear about was it feels like actually across the piece, there is now a recognition that the economy doesn't work for people. And, you know, at the time I took over, if you remember, in this country, Jeremy Corbyn was in the opposition, Theresa May was our prime minister. And actually, they came from very different parts of the political spectrum, but they were both saying the economy doesn't work for everyone. And I came into the organisation and said, look, we've won the argument that this system is broken and it's not working. And actually, the reality of it is for the majority of people in the middle and the bottom, they're working hard. They are doing everything, they're struggling, and yet they are not better off. And that feels like the moment where there is a recognition that something needs to change, but it's not clear what that change looks like. And so for us, the agenda we set out was, the first thing is about how do we get to a place where people have enough to live on? Very simple, it's not particularly radical. And that's a big part about work and the job market and how we create jobs that pay people enough to be able to raise a family, and the changes that you need to do around that. But it is also about the safety net and our social security system, which was always supposed to be that insurance, because we will all have times where we're up and we're down. And yet our insurance system doesn't ensure that people have enough to be able to bounce back from that and build out from that. So for us, getting that base where people have enough income to live on is the kind of first core part. But you then have to combine it with those foundational things. So what we call, universal services, and that's health, education, childcare, social care. And if you provided that at high quality, that would transform the lives of so many people. And then the third part for us is that actually that opportunity, because there is a big risk around climate change, but there's also a massive opportunity to invest in our communities, to create jobs, to remake the way the economy works, but do that in a way that actually lifts up our communities. So what we call a Green New Deal, actually what is that program of work that gets us to, zero carbon quickly, but does it in a way that creates jobs, helps people transition, but critically rebuilds, revives, and boosts our communities and our local economy. And then the final bit about that is about power and shifting power in where the economy is. So, how do we get power from the hands of the few into the many? And part of that is things like ownership, ensuring that ownership is more distributed, so that everyone has a stake in how the economy works, but also political power. Particularly in this country, we're massively centralized. Too many decisions are made too far from people. And why that matters, because I've been there at the center, is unless you understand the specifics in the community, unless you can see the faces of the mothers and the children that you're impacting, the sorts of decisions you make are different. They don't have the gravitas, they don't have the weight that they need to, because you can't see the eyes of the people that you're impacting on. And so pushing those decisions closer to people where there is that connection for us is the final bit. So those three kind of big planks, the social settlement, Green New Deal, and what we call a democratic economy, which is essentially putting power in our hands, became the core part of the agenda that we've been trying to drive through.
I know you have said a lot about what you've just said in terms of economic development in different areas and how you want to make people become sustainable in terms of building their own economy and having some amount of power and control within their hands. What are some of the major advices that you were giving to government in terms of making the economy sustainable for the average man in the UK? What are some of the basic advices and some of the areas that you were actually directing your policies towards that will make life easy for citizens in the UK? What are some of those areas?
Yeah, so I've not talked about housing. And for me, housing is absolutely key. So at the moment, there is a big campaign that we're running, Homes for Us. And our starting point is when I talk about those foundational things, housing is a key part of that. And if you could provide everyone with good, affordable homes, like that's the first building block. If you don't have that, you're chasing. If you don't have that, you don't have that kind of basic. And in the end, the way that we solve this is that we build more. The main bottleneck to that is investment and the unwillingness of national government to essentially create enough funding in order to build the homes that we need, as well as getting councils, housing associations and other providers to be building a lot more. So for me, housing is a big part of that. And we've both been trying to influence the current government, but also talk to opposition parties to say we need a major house building program. We should be looking to build 3 million homes, and they should be social homes so that people can afford to live in homes that are decent and can raise a family. I think the second area where at the moment we're trying to put quite a lot of time and energy is in terms of work. How do you build the power of workers in order to be able to both negotiate better contracts, but also generate jobs that pay well, and make sure there are jobs in the places that people live. And what does that look like in terms of the sorts of investment and who makes those investment? And then I think the third thing that we're pushing on at the moment is, I'll talk about energy and the energy crisis in particular, but in terms of sort of long-term pieces, you know, the government talks about levelling up, or was talking about levelling up. And for us, it was never about north-south, you know, it was never about London and the rest, because you look across London, we have some of the most deprived communities. You look at, you know, Camberwell and Peckham, we've got, you know, huge areas of poverty and deprivation. And so it was about lifting people up no matter where they are. And in that is a completely different agenda about the role of businesses and small businesses, because they create so many jobs in our communities, and yet we don't support them. It is about training and skills, and that's not just about kids and education, but actually how do you retrain people and upskill them throughout their journey? And we don't have a proper plan for that. We never have done. And so at the moment, we're trying to push the government to say, you need to think about this in a different way. You've got to start where communities are. You've got to start where the local economy is. And that will take you to sectors like, you know, social care, health, hospitality, like shops. You know, they hire so many people, but pay tends to be much lower than in other sectors. Yeah. And actually, if you could do a huge job to kind of improve the jobs and the pay in those particular sectors, that would have a huge impact on people's lives. So, and then energy at the moment and the cost of living. And for us, you know, you've got to do things to help people with rising prices. And there are a whole set of package of things that we've come up with, but you've also got to boost people's incomes. And that is about, yes, you know, income through work, but it is also about social security and protection, which, you know, these are times when actually the capacity for us to club together and help people who are struggling at the moment get through the next 18 months.
Okay. Well, and I know you've been advising government, but now you want to get into government. How did you get involved in politics to be a member of the Labour Party? Because we have to be direct now. So basically, you've been advising government in a lot of policy making in terms of economic development so that people will be able to sustain their livelihood. And now you want to get involved into government structures. Do you think that is going to be a challenge for you? And just give us a short brief of how you actually get involved into politics. Because I know you said earlier on, your dad never wanted you to be a politician. That's the only thing he possibly said you shouldn't get involved in. How did you get involved into politics? Because economic development and politics, yes, it goes hand in hand, but it has a lot of challenges alongside each other. How did you get yourself involved in politics in the UK?
Yeah, so really good question. So, you know, two levels. So I've always been Labour. You know, we were just brought up to be Labour in our household. There was never any question. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, at the point that I was old enough to and able to, I got involved in the local party because it was very clear to me that the way that we sort of drove the kind of change that I believe in was if we had a Labour government. So I've been a Labour activist for about 15 years. The step into Labour nationally, I think, has been a kind of evolution, and it's twofold. So when I worked in government, I was a civil servant. So I worked, I was an official. I wasn't in the political realm. And I was there from the change from a Labour government to a Conservative, to the coalition government, in fact. And I was there under, I worked at the centre under Blair and then under Brown and then under Cameron.
So you've worked along 3 prime ministers in the UK.
3 prime ministers in the UK, very different.
I know the reason why I'm saying that specifically. But continue.
Yes, with very different approaches, let's put it like that, and very different political operations, which was quite interesting to see. But I think for me, the moment that was the kind of, if you like, the big kind of political awakening for me was seeing some of the things that we'd built up over the years of the Labour government, and one that that still sticks with me. So the last major project I worked for Gordon Brown on was on youth services, because it was very clear, and we'd seen the evidence that actually if you built proper youth services and youth clubs and infrastructure for kids, it had massive impact on their chances, on their trajectory. And I was working with a team that had developed Sure Start, that had kind of built that whole program, and we were thinking about how we basically lock it in if there was a change of government after the election. And I remember when the coalition government started to drive through austerity, and essentially we were being asked to dismantle all of that, dismantle Sure Start centres, dismantle all the youth services, close down the stuff that I'd been in communities and I'd seen the impact. I remember going into communities and talking to some of the kids that used to be involved in gangs or, had, got involved in knife crime, and through some of these services, they were able to find a different pathway. So I knew it worked. And when you're being asked to tear all of that down, I think for me, I was like, I can't make my peace with this. And yes, we might be doing good in some areas, but I can see the damage that we're doing and I can't do this. And I think for me, that was the point when I was just like, well, actually, it matters who is in charge. It matters the kind of projects that they're driving forward. And that's when I sort of left the civil service and went to work for Ed Miliband and the Labour Party. And since then, I've worked on kind of progressive policies. So my leanings have always been quite clear. I think in terms of my own decision to kind of make the step into politics, I've got to the stage where I can see, as an economist and through all the work that I'm doing, I think we are in a moment. I think both in terms of people have had enough. I think the settlement that says to people, have multiple jobs, work every hour of the day, and you don't do better, you're not better off, and your kids aren't doing better than you. I think people have had enough of that. So it feels like there is a point of break in our economics, that all these crises are making worse. And then we've also got the challenge of kind of climate. And it feels like we are in a moment of change. And it also feels like our politics hasn't quite caught up with that change.
Right.
And I spend a lot of my time campaigning and advocating and trying to persuade the politicians that we need big responses to some of the problems that we face. And we can't ask people to suck some of this stuff up. We need to do things differently. And I think I've got to a point where I think I can achieve change from outside, and that's what I've been doing through my organisation.
Okay.
And I now need to step inside and be part of it to try and shift our politics, to try and help come up with the big ideas that I think we need to have in order to respond to the clear failings that I think most people can now see with the way our economy works and in whose interest it works.
So would you say specifically the reason for some of these cuts when we had the Conservative government, the coalition government, is based on the fact that they thought it was a wrong economic decision made by you guys when you actually putting all these policies together, or they just wanted to cut the drive of youth development or youth engagement in terms of developing themselves into becoming better citizens? What actually made you think they actually made all those cuts within communities? Because the devastation of what that cut might be, and we have seen the repercussions of the cuts that they made in all areas of social housing, social services, and also areas of youth development. Because when we had all those cuts, it means all the youth centers were closed, all the areas that were engaging in terms of rehabilitating young boys who are involved in gangs and knife crimes increased a lot more because there were no safe area for them to go and participate or get themselves involved. So what made you actually think they decided to close down all these areas that were helping young people?
It's a good question. And do you know what? I asked myself that question over and over again because it made no sense. And in the end, all you can do is look back and try and rationalize for people, at least try and understand. I'm broadly, I'm not in the school of politics that believes that people are bad. I think generally most people, she says, the majority of people who go into public services trying to do good, they might just have a different view and a different set of values that drives what they believe is good. And I think in the end, they felt that the most important thing that they needed to do was to get the economy back on track. And to do that, they had to cut the deficit. And if that meant that we raised the ground, you know, and burnt down a set of things, that was the price that was worth paying. Because if we got the public finances in track, that would then help the economy, and then that would create jobs, and that would help people out in the long term. Now, I think that was completely the wrong analysis. And actually the last 10 years have shown us that. Yeah. Because when you cut, you're not only cutting communities and people off at their knees, but you're not even investing in the economy in a way that allows us to get to the end state that they wanted, you know. And I thought that was a really interesting comparison with what was going on in the US under Obama, where they chose not to go down austerity, but they chose to invest and stimulate their economy and put money into people's pockets. And they were able to drive the economy far quicker than we were, and actually to pay off the deficit that they'd accumulated during the financial crisis. So it was clear to me that their analysis and what they were trying to do was completely wrong. But I think what does go back to values is, even if your endpoint was right, the wider social impacts of that decision was always clear, and they didn't care about it.
All right.
They didn't care about it. And for me, that is about values, because if like community and compassion and social justice and equality of opportunity is a core value, you wouldn't be making those sorts of decisions.
That's true. I know you're planning, or you're intending to be representing another complex, diverse and challenging community within London area, specifically Peckham and Camberwell. I know we have a huge amount of ethnic minorities, especially African ethnic minorities within that sort of area and borough. Why do you choose to be representing that particular borough? Is it based on the fact that you possibly have some kind of lineage towards them, or you feel you belong and you can help and develop that community a bit more? Or what made you think this is what you want to do and this is where you want to represent? What gave you that choice?
Yeah, so I mean, two things. I always knew that I'd want to represent. I'm a Londoner. I'm a South Londoner. I know there are people who will go across the country to represent, but for me, that doesn't feel authentic. I want to represent home. And I think for me, Camberwell and Peckham is particularly special because there's such a big West African community and there's a big Sierra Leonean community, and it feels like home. You know, I feel like if I can represent, I'll represent the whole community, but there is that heart connection to, representing my own that I would be proud and honored to do. But I think will make me better because, in your head, you're representing your family, you're representing your community. And when you're in the bubble of Westminster, when you're in those trade-offs that sometimes politicians are being asked to make, I think when you have that heart connection, that's the thing that will keep you straight. And that's the thing that will ensure that you're making decisions that will work for the people that you represent, because they are your people, they are your family, they are your community. And so it was a pretty clear choice for me. I would love to represent this community because it feels like home.
I know Peckham and Camberwell community is very much diverse, and we've had Harriet Hammond, who has been representing us for a couple of years, and she did exemplary well within her term. And I think definitely you stepping into that sort of position will be also not challenging, but possibly extremely challenging, because when you're dealing with your own, it's quite different from when you're dealing with people who you might not have known or who you don't have any form of political relationship with, but you're there to serve. Are you really thinking you'll be able to go through that boundary of saying to yourself, okay, these are my people? Possibly you might have some kind of personal challenges that you might not want to get involved in. Do you think it will be very challenging or a bit easy for you to be able to deal with some of the economic difficulties that you might face within Camberwell and Peckham area?
I think it'll be challenging, but I'm up for the challenge. I think I would be naive. If, there are parts of the country where as a constituency, as an MP, if you're in a leafy, affluent part of the country, of course you'll have casework, but it's not casework of the scale, the complexity, the difficulty. But I want that, I want to do this job if I, in the end, am successful in my journey to get there, because I want to try and help and change people's lives. And I think if I wanted an easy ride, then this is probably not, I shouldn't be thinking about getting into politics. I shouldn't be thinking about becoming an MP. But for me, if I, when I look back on if I am successful and I become the MP, and I look back at the end of my time, I want to feel like the things I did had an impact on the people that need the help the most. And I think in representing this community, that's exactly what I'll be doing. And it will be hard and it will be difficult and it will take so much of my soul, but that's the commitment I want to make.
There is a lot of challenges within Peckham and Peckham and Camberwell communities. We've had a lot of economic development disadvantage. We've had a lot of social disadvantage, and now we have the degeneration disadvantage as well, which means we are not being given equal opportunities, even though we kind of meant to be one of the most highest amount of ethnic minorities within the borough itself. Are you going to bring in policies that will make some of these things possibly slightly easy for people within the community that doesn't have the privilege to be able to gain certain facilities, will have access to certain things that will make them possibly live a better life?
100%. For me, what we're seeing playing out in Camberwell and Peckham is a kind of microcosm of the bigger challenge, which is, the pie grows, but it doesn't grow in a way that benefits everyone. And the people that need to be lifted up are not lifted up enough. And so a lot of the ideas that we've talked about, a lot of the ideas that, I'm fighting for now, and that's not going to change when I become an MP, I will still continue campaigning for them. But, at a very basic level, if we could get investment in social homes across the borough that was open and accessible to people at the scale that people needed it, that would be transformative. If you then combine that with, for me, childcare and education, so I will be campaigning for free universal childcare, because when people are working, the ability to not pay a fortune to have your kids in childcare, but also it will open up the opportunity to actually work when you don't have to worry that, how am I going to afford this, or how do I get my mom to do this and that in order to be able to help me get into work. So if you can combine childcare with education that is of high standard and invested in, that has a massive impact on our kids and the opportunities for our kids. And then for me, the sort of final bit is, this living income we talk about, where it's a combination of, at the very least, I think you need an income floor. And when we talk about the minimum wage, all the work we've done suggests in London it should be £15 an hour, rather than the £9.80 that we have at the moment. But you combine that with a much, much better settlement in social security and through universal credit. And why that matters is we're still at a world where not enough people are getting jobs that pay enough to be able to afford the basics. And at the root cause, that's the thing that we need to change. That is the root of poverty. It's not actually that complicated. There are not enough jobs that pay enough for people to live well and afford the basics and raise their kids. And therefore, you need a whole set of policies that do that. And also you need regulation that says, of course we have a minimum wage of £15 an hour. Of course we create the capacity of people to club together and negotiate better pay settlements. And we do that alongside investing in our communities. And so, when we talk about something like the Green New Deal, in my head, I'm thinking about, well, that's massive investment into Camberwell and Peckham. That means completely rebuilding our streets and our neighbourhoods, rebuilding our high streets, because actually as we're trying to retrofit, we might as well then invest in that infrastructure. It means a public transport network that, by the way, I would massively subsidise so that people can get from A to B in a much cheaper way. And it means creating lots of jobs. So all the things I want to do nationally is with a view of trying to change the lot of people locally. And I will always fight for that. That's what I've tried to do over the last, 20 years. And if I'm successful, that's what I will be trying to do. And I just think we're at a point where we don't really have a choice but to start doing some of these stuff and doing it in a big way.
I know I'm going to bring in Femi quickly, but before I bring in Femi, how are you going to be able to generate funding to bring in all those policies together and make sure that they work? Because we know for sure government is going to give you budgets to be able to run all some of the policies that you want to put in place. Are you going to be able to lobby for those budgets to be given to you because they think, yes, it will work for what you want to put in place? Or you're going to find a way, or you're going to find ways and means how you can generate funding to be able to execute some of those policies? How are you going to be able to do all of that if you don't have the budgets needed from governments directly?
So, I think the first job is to get government to invest in some of this stuff and invest in it properly. And this is the argument that I've been making up to now and I'll continue making. Everyone scratches their head and says, oh, why is the UK economy doing so much worse than France or Germany or Sweden or Finland? That's because we don't invest. We haven't invested. We haven't invested for the last 15 years. So I think part of the argument that I would want to make with the Labour government, and to be fair, we've made, so Labour have pledged to invest 28 billion a year in the green transition. That's a massive investment pledge, bigger than anything that's being spent at the moment. But that is investment in jobs. That's investment in homes and building green homes. That's investment in our transport networks. That's investment in our energy infrastructure. That's investment in our communities. So for me, unlocking that at the national level then allows us to say, okay, well, we've got the pot for the area. How do we use it in the best way? And actually, how do we get the community involved in deciding what are the schemes and projects that are going to have maximum bang for buck? So I think there are two parts of it. And then there's a massive role for businesses in all of this. I think, the job of re-gearing our economy is an endeavor between the public and the private sector as a partnership. And we need to kind of get round the table with businesses, local businesses that are investing in the area, to say, well, how do we do this better? How do we, when we're regenerating the community, we're regenerating it for people who are in the community, not just people who are coming from outside. And I think one of the things you can do as an MP is help facilitate those conversations and help bring the right people around the room. But you cannot and you must not, in my view, and this is all the work that we've done, reinforces this. You've got to do it with the community sitting side by side with everyone else, as a stakeholder, being able to direct what happens rather than decisions made here that sort of then pass down and kind of given as dictate to the community that this is the way it plays out.
Thank you very much, Miatta. I'll bring in Femi. If you're watching us, you're just watching an exclusive interview from CRJ Media to Miatta Fahnbuleh, who is looking forward to become the representative MP for Peckham and Camberwell. Over to you, Femi, before I come back to Miatta.
Okay, hi. Hi, T-Boy. Hi, Miatta. Again, welcome on our platform. And viewers, I saw you on an T-Boy Bumika for Canton. So I've got 4 questions. Have I got enough time to ask Miatta 4 questions, T-Boy? I'm taking permission.
But yeah, go ahead. Let's start with the first one. It depends on how much time.
Okay, so I'll make them quick.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, we're from Sierra Leone. We have similar backgrounds. People always say, and they talk about how much money the diaspora contributes to Africa in general. My question to you is, do you know the kind of figures that the immigrants, especially African immigrants, contribute to the UK economy?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know it. I don't know it off the top of my head. I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head. I did know the exact figure because I remember looking it up when I went on to Question Time one time because I knew there was going to be a question on immigration, and I had my stats. But the thing that I do know is all the evidence points to the fact that immigrant populations are a net contributor to the UK economy. And we do the combination of both contributing to the UK economy as well as remittances, where we send money back home. So I don't have the exact figure in my head, but the point of evidence is very clear, which I think is a really important point to bring out, because sometimes in the debate about immigrants and our contribution and our role, I think there's a lot of misinformation.
Yeah, sorry about that. Obviously, I didn't want to know the exact figure either, but I wanted you to remind people that, as immigrants, we do contribute a lot to society in the UK as well. We send money back home, we support our relatives, we support governments from countries where we're from, but we also contribute a vast amount of money into the UK coffers, and for me that makes me proud. And when the whole Brexit discussion and the immigrants discussion, I paid international fees, and trust me, from school days to university wasn't cheap. I was sitting next to other kids here who were paying a fraction. Well, they were not even paying because they were getting grants compared to what I was paying, and so for me personally, it hurts when people say that we take, because there's a lot of us. I mean, even the ones that are in low employment, I believe that they give more than they take. They're always at work. They hardly take days off sick, and even when they do, they don't get sick pay. There's so many issues around that. So that's what I wanted to bring up. But I've got a few more questions. I'm going to speed through them. Again, people say you got to be the change that you want to see. I'm asking you, in the different departments that you've worked in, what have you set targets for gender, social, and racial equality for yourself and your team?
Yeah, I have, and actually it's one of the things I'm really proud of. I think two things. I think you've got to walk the walk. And, when I took over this organization and the organization I run at the moment, I was really clear that, we needed to be, partly because there are not that many economists that are women and are and are Black or Asian, that we needed to represent that and be a bit of a kind of break and rupture. And so, we've done a massive drive to diversify the organization. When I, from my board, which now is really diverse in terms of, the split 50-50. I think we've got actually more women and men now, but also people from different ethnic backgrounds was another kind of big thing that we wanted to achieve, and we have done. And then across the sort of staff body. And one of the things that I'm really proud of us is that, we were really clear that sometimes it's just the pathway, the opportunities. So we've, we cut our internship and work experience schemes that tended to have kids who already had quite high social capital go for them, and started a kind of access program with one of the London universities, where it was kids from ethnic backgrounds, from working class backgrounds, that essentially get a chance to come into the organisation, to learn the ropes, to create some contacts and networks. And then I, on a personal note, have always mentored, kids from, young African kids who, we talked about parents at the start, who might have parents that aren't encouraging them that they can do anything. And I've always seen it as my own personal responsibility to take, a sort of cohort in the next generation underneath my wings and show them what's possible and advise them and be able to say, look, if you just want someone to be a sounding block, I'm here. So I try to walk the walk as well as talk the talk.
Okay, great. I promise. No, T-Boy, please, two more very short ones.
Sorry, my answer was too long as well. I'll keep it on short.
So, Miatta, quickly, our current, our new Prime Minister today made a statement about lifting the cap on bonuses for bankers. What are your thoughts on this?
Where to begin? This was supposed to be a short answer, so I think that when we have a cost of living crisis, when we are seeing millions of people being pushed into poverty, when we're seeing the gap between those at the top and everyone else, and those on low incomes increase at an exponential rate, the idea that this is what our government believes is the priority, I think is very, very telling. There was a reason why the cap was put in place, and that was to try and shift the incentives within the city. That hasn't gone away, and removing it will take away the incentive for more cautious investment, because people will take bigger risks. But I think there is a bigger economic and moral question there, which is, do you care about helping and lifting those in the middle and the bottom so that they have a fair shot, or are you focused on the top 0.5% who are taking a massive slug of the pie anyway? And we'll see where this government goes, but the first indications of what they want to do, I think, is really worrying. And I think we've got quite a job to put a lot of pressure on them to start making the sorts of decisions that they need to if they're serious about helping the economy out and helping people within the economy.
Great, thanks for that. I have my last question, T-Boy. Apologies.
No problem, that's fine for me.
So, Miatta, my last question, I promise, is a very short one. What would you say to a young Miatta, somebody starting her career or his career, now? What advice would you give them of the experiences you've had through your career so far?
That's a really good question. So I think the first thing I'd say is knock the barriers away. When you're told you can't do something, when you're told it's not your place, when you're told there are pathways you can't take, you've got to knock those barriers away, and you've got to back yourself, even when you might look at it and it feels impossible. But you've got to knock those barriers away. And that's a bit of advice, that my parents gave me and that I give everyone else. You kind of have to believe that you can forge your own path, and sometimes it might feel almost impossible, but back yourself and start on that journey. And you might actually end up not where I thought I'd be working in international development. I'd be in the UN right now. I didn't think I would be where I am. And actually, opportunities and different paths will open up for you, but you've got to have that determination that you can kind of get through those barriers. I think the sort of second thing I'd say is sometimes you've got to fake it till you make it. You will walk into rooms and you will feel intimidated, and you will get the sense that it's not your place. And you've got to take a deep breath, and you've got to create the space for yourself. And even if you have to fake it for the first 10, 15, sometimes it's like you have to fake it a few times. You do it until you build the confidence that actually you have a right to be in whatever space or forum it is, getting your voice heard, making the waves that you want to make. And then at some point you almost learn that actually you have the legitimacy to do that. But at the start, and I don't think it's just because you're a young woman or because you're a young Black woman. I think we all have it in our different ways. And there is something about actually everyone has their own insecurities about the spaces they walk into and whether they have the legitimacy to own that. And you've got to back yourself, because no one will do. But once you start backing yourself, suddenly you realize that people open up the space for you, and then other people start backing you. And then the third thing I'd say is reach out, because actually there are lots of people who have found a pathway, and a lot of us want to create a pathway for others. And the thing I'd say to all the people like adults out there is we've got to look out for the kids, and we've got to try and help them follow in our footsteps in order to make sure that there are paths that are being blazed for them, because we've got all the scars of how we've got to where we have done, and we have a responsibility to the next generation to take them up with us.
I think those questions are quite intense. They sound like something just basic, but they're not basic. Definitely, these are some of the challenges you're possibly going to face within our own community. And can you imagine? And we are not actually pushing the barriers, but we're just trying to be honest with some of the questions that we are coming across to you. But I think what you've just said have made a clear manifestation of the kind of policies that you're going to bring on board within within Peckham and Camberwell, and also what sort of differences economically you're going to make with what we already have. Not saying what we have is bad, is dangerous, is not good enough at all, but I think you'll be able to add more value because of your economic background. I'm going to look at two questions that are coming from the chat. One is saying specifically, the current economic climate in the UK is getting harder. What advice will you give to a Prime Minister to reduce the burden on poorer earners? Which I think you've highlighted, but will you be able to say something about this?
Yeah, so you'll hear a lot about this. So we're expecting a mini budget from the government on Friday. So I will be out shouting the advice. And for me, it's very simple. They've got to do two things. You've got to protect people, because the scale of price rises that we're seeing, where people are being hammered from all sides, is not the sort of thing that people can cushion. And so, for us, there are a set of things that we're pushing for at the moment. We think that the government should be introducing a cost of living allowance, £750 for all low and middle income families in order to help people with rising prices right now. In addition to that, we need big reform in the energy market. And one of the things that we're pushing them is this idea of free basic energy, where you say, for the first slug of energy you get that for free, and then you have a kind of rising tariff above that. But that would help people in the here and now just deal with this. But my second bit of advice to them is, you've got to start restructuring the economy so that when we recover from this, and when we're thinking about, they talk about growth a lot, there are two pathways to growth. You either say, we're going to give all the support to people at the top, and let's hope they create lots of wealth and it will trickle down. That doesn't work. It hasn't worked for the last 12 to 15 years, because what we've seen is those at the top are getting richer and the rest of us are being held back. And so the other model is that you say, well, actually, we've got to boost people's incomes. We've got to put money in their pockets. We're going to help them create jobs, because actually, if you build the economy from the middle and the bottom up, that's how you create an economy that works for people. And we will be screaming at the top of our voices to say to the government, yes, we need to get the economy going, but you've got to make decisions that will help the majority of people out, because if you do that, that's the way in which we get to an economy that works.
Okay, I know we've talked a lot about representing within Peckham and Camberwell, and we have had so many black MPs over the years representing Labour Party. Do you think these people are some of the driving force that actually made you think, well, I want to be part of this particular journey to be able to effect change?
So, change doesn't come from one person or one individual. I think there has to be a coalition of people who are driving change and are change makers. And so part of, if I'm successful, trying to find those allies within Parliament that are clear that actually we are in a moment that requires us to have big ideas and boldness and ambition for our communities, and to fight for that, so that you have a government that is brave and bold enough to make big decisions that will impact on us, I think will be key. But I'm really clear that politics on its own can't drive things, and actually you need people to mobilise, and you strengthen the hand of the change makers within Parliament or within a government or in any political institution when there is people power behind them, where there are ordinary people that are saying, we want something better. This is not good enough. Enough is enough. We want something better. And so for me, a lot of what we're doing at the moment is trying to organise in our communities and reach out to people and get people to mobilise and say, the current settlement is not good enough. It is not good enough, and we want something better, and it looks like this, and help them develop ideas and equip them with ideas so they can demand something. And so for me, we drive change when there are communities that are mobilizing outside of politics, and then people in politics that are representing their voice, and then you get that perfect storm that starts to shift things. And I think that's kind of what we need at the moment.
So when is the election, and what will be your message to potential voters, and what do you expect people to do within the communities that we're talking about right now to be able to give you that maximum support for you to gain the MP seat within Peckham and Camberwell? When is the election date set, and what do you expect people to do?
So I think there are 2 steps. So the first step is there'll be a process, which will be a Labour Party process to choose a candidate, and that's the thing I'm putting myself forward for. And there'll be other, equally good, I'm sure, candidates that will be bringing themselves forward. And anyone that is a Labour Party member that is in Camberwell and Peckham has a vote. And so I'm trying to reach out to as many of those members as possible to say, join my campaign, get behind the team, get behind this, let's build momentum, and let's win that selection. And then if I'm chosen as Labour's candidate for the area, then we've got the general election. So that selection process, I think, will happen in the next 2 months, 3 months, so pretty quickly. So if you've got a Labour card and you're a Labour member, you've got to vote, use that vote, and I'd love you to use that vote for me.
And what if you're not a Labour member? How do you register to become one?
So you can register via the Labour Party website, and there is, if you click on labour.org, you can essentially become a member, and you'll have, and I'd encourage, I think in the end, politics is about people. And if we don't like the look of politics, get involved, change it so that you can change the decision. I think the Labour Party is in a really interesting time. I think we have a big shot at being the next government. And my priority is that we are a next government that's a reforming government. And there is a chance, I think, for people to get involved now to try and shape the direction of that reforming government. So irrespective of my selection, get involved, because there is a party that potentially could be a change maker and can change all of our lives. And if there's a chance to influence that party, the more people that care about change that are in it, the better. And so if I am successful in becoming Labour's candidate, then the next step will be a general election, which we don't know when it will be called, but we expect it to be in 18 months, where I'll essentially be running to then become an MP when Harriet resigns.
Right, very interesting part of it. Well, definitely Harriet is going to resign because I think she has served her term, and she knows definitely she's not very strong enough to be able to run around and do exactly what you possibly want to achieve within your own reign. I believe definitely within the communities within Southwark, I would say specifically, there's a huge amount of Sierra Leonean community here, and I think most of them are actively involved in politics, possibly politics back home in Sierra Leone, but in the UK, they kind of understand the nature of politics, but most of us are not registered political party members in any spectrum of whatsoever you might think. What I think possibly might have been the disadvantage a couple of years ago is the fact that people were not actively involved in politics in the UK, especially within our communities. But we've seen a lot of disadvantage that has gone towards our community within the past couple of years, within the conservative government. I'm not campaigning for you, I'm just saying the fact. I want people to think I've already started your campaign. But for the fact that we've had a lot of cuts within social facilities, economic facilities, and deprived areas of what we think are some of the things that we should have as a community that hasn't been given to us, which I think we should have fought for, but most of us are not actively involved in politics, especially to become registered members of political parties. So basically, I am encouraging you to be part of any kind of change you want by getting yourself involved in registering. I haven't registered, but I'm definitely going to register as a Labour Party person because I have been actively following Labour for my entire life in the UK. And everybody that is of color, that is of ethnic minority, I am not saying that's the only reason why you should follow Labour, but I think they have given us the platform to be able to exist as human beings within the UK, and also being able to giving us the opportunities for us to be able to do things that we think will benefit not just us, but within our community. And over the past 5 to 10 years, we have seen a lot of change within our local communities, especially Peckham and Camberwell, where we will boastfully say we now have Sierra Leonean businesses, Sierra Leonean communities that are slowly developing. Now, can you imagine if you have one of your own, what sort of difference it will make? I'm not saying we're going to go begin acting the much every day if you become the MP for some. That is not what I'm saying, but for the fact that we are within the confinement of the UK political atmosphere, we'll be able to lobby for some of the things that will benefit us as a community. And when you have one of your own, they'll be able to understand your cultural background, your cultural differences, and some of the things that people might find challenging and not be in the position to be able to discuss. Harriet Hammond's door has been open in terms of surgeries and support within the ethnic minority communities within Peckham and Camberwell. And I know for sure, if Miatta ends up to be the MP representing us, her doors will be extremely open. But that doesn't mean we should take advantage of that. But now let me come back to you, Miatta, whilst we're wrapping up. I want you to sell yourself to the Peckham and Camberwell community, which I know for sure has a huge amount of civil union that will be able to register themselves as Labour members and will have the opportunity to vote for you when Labour is choosing their candidates. And of course, if you're going to be the chosen one, definitely all of us will join your campaign team and knock on every door within Peckham and Camberwell to make sure that you take up that seat. Not for us personally, but for the kids that we have within Southwark, so that they will have the opportunity to gain opportunities that will be equally shared among them, and there will not be any form of discrimination based on the fact that they are ethnic minorities or they are deprived communities. So what will be your message of selling points towards this particular community that you want to represent, in your own words?
So I think the first thing I'd say is I know where I've come from. I know who I'm fighting for, and I'm ambitious for us and I'm ambitious for our community. And the reason I want to get into politics is not because I think it's an easy ride. It's because I am passionate and committed about change. And I think we are at a point in our politics where people have had enough. People have had enough and we need big change. And that requires vision, that requires being bold and ambitious, and that requires ideas. And I've been in government, I've seen how the system works. I've spent the last, 10 years coming up with ideas about how we can actually change things that would have a huge impact on people in this community. And that's what I want to take with me if I become an MP. So I will be rooted here because it's home. This is my family. This is my community. This is where I've come from. But I'm ambitious and very clear about the change that I think we need. And I will fight every day for that change. And I will be there for you to knock on my door if I don't deliver for you.
All right, that is a promise, and definitely that promise will be fulfilled within the next couple of years to come when you actually take in the position of representing Peckham and Camberwell. Femi, is there anything else you would like to ask Miatta before we let her go?
No, Tibo, I think my 4 questions were enough. I just want to say thank you to Miatta for joining us. It's special. So I'm not into politics, I'm not into economics, but most of the challenges that Miatta is facing and has faced, I have faced them. I work in the city, I do high-end events, and sometimes I'm sitting in the room and they're talking about, equity, they're talking about gender parity, and you look around the room and it's hard to see people like us. It's very hard in most of the corporate London. Most of the people that look like us have menial jobs. We're cleaners, we're security guards. During COVID, we were going to work, and the ones that didn't look like us were chilling at home. Oh, actually, they were working at home. Sorry for my French, but there's a lot of challenges. And Tibo, you're right. What we would urge people to vote and get Miatta or somebody like Miatta is for our kids for tomorrow. It's a knowledge that it's possible, that somebody can actually get there that looks like me and you. That mentorship, that icon, that person that you can look up to. I remember somebody said to me that, for ages, our kids saw a president of America as a black man. Just that knowledge alone was encouraging that anything and everything is possible. So we urge people in Peckham and Camberwell to register, and if given the opportunity, to vote for Miatta for the position she's looking for, because we need people like us to be able to change things for our kids to have a better tomorrow. And on that note, I'd like to thank all of our viewers, but mainly I'd like to thank Miatta for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I think you've just given up your own wrapping up statement, but I'll ask Miatta one more thing. I need you to enlighten some of the young Sierra Leonean girls like yourself who think the sky is not the limit because you can go beyond the sky. What sort of advice will you give to them for them to be able to take the next step, which will be the driving force for them to be able to achieve in life, regardless of the agenda? What would you say to them as your final message for today's program?
I'd say get involved. I'd say back yourself. We need more women in senior positions. We need more women in politics. And I'm really clear that if you want to change things, you've got to jump in. You've got to jump in and you've got to change it from inside. So if you've got an inclination, don't hold back, because you will blaze a trail for others, and they will then jump further than us. If I do something, I hopefully blaze a trail for some, and I hope they will leapfrog me, and then the next generation will leapfrog them, and that's how we make progress.
Thank you very much, Miatta. We're definitely going to be able to host you back again here. I'm not saying you're one of those politicians, but don't be one of those that will close the doors when they get to finally the seats of what they were looking forward to have. Definitely, I know you'll not be one of them, because I think your interaction within the community for the past couple of months has been great. You've made yourself open to the community. You've been attending events, functions, and things that you think you might have access to. And I saw a couple of your posts a couple of days ago that you actually are involved into a lot of sports, because I saw you watched a match at the Peckham Football Club or so, which I think was good, because you're cutting across the barriers of what many women will possibly not want to do, because not just to sit at the back of your desk and be an aristocrat politician, but a politician that is actually moving around and hanging around with the people that they are serving, which is very good for what I've saw so far. And I think I would say kudos to you for that. Congratulations by doing that. And I think we'll be able to have more engagement with you within the community. And by you visiting the community, you're making yourself familiar to some of the problems and challenges that the community have. So when you eventually get that seat, you'll be able to deal with those issues. Not actually thinking about discriminating anybody, but making sure that the facilities that the community lack, you'll be able to provide it for them so that they will have a livelihood and have a better community for them to share. Well, I want to say thank you to you, and definitely we're looking forward to see you anytime soon. But if you're watching and you live within the UK and you live within Southwark, please make it a point of duty to share the link, because the link has been posted on the chat group that takes you direct to the Southwark, to the Labour website for you to register yourself as a Labour member. Then you'll be having an opportunity to vote for the next representation for Camberwell and Peckham. So if you're there, you're watching, don't forget to click the link and make yourself a member of the Labour Party. We all know what Labour can do for us as people living in the UK, or minority people living in the UK. And I think that number has grown a lot within southeast of London. And we all know some of the challenges that we were faced with a couple of years ago, when we have a coalition government that became a government of total cuts within all the facilities that we had that was provided by the Labour government before we have the coalition government. So we don't want that repeat again to come close to home. Because what we are seeing now is a lot of facilities being given to the people who are the high earners. And can you imagine if the ones who are on top are making more money and the ones who are in the middle and at the bottom are making less or nothing? What sort of UK that we're looking forward to live within the next 10, 15 years? It is not for us anymore, but for our children. And yet, our grandchildren who are now growing up to become citizens of the UK. Let us get involved in UK politics, because this is where we live for now. And if we don't get involved, we're not giving us any sort of justice for us to be saying to people we are involved and we are helping to make the change that we so desire to see. Get involved and be part of the change. So thank you very much for watching, and we're definitely going to be here tomorrow for another edition of How They Go Inside the Republic. Today we have been exclusive. Now, so English no more than me, but never mind. We will come back one day with the Creole. Femi, over to you. You want to say something?
Yes, C-boy, sorry for interject, but you talk about people that wait up now, Peckham and Camberwell. I want to actually say to those outside those regions, obviously a lot of us live in other areas of London and the UK or other areas of the world with something with the Watch This program. I'm urging you guys, if you have connections of people living in those areas, speak to them. Share our link. So they can come and watch and listen to what Miatta has to say if they haven't been or seen or heard from her. And again, share the link for them to be able to register and vote, because a lot of us, ethnic minority, we do not represent in ballots. Whenever they say election, they come, what's in any get for do it to me. So let's encourage people to vote, and let's get one of ours in. And let's, as she said herself, let's go knock on her door when she does not deliver what she has promised us to do. So for me, that's a challenge. I would like to challenge all of you guys to give Miatta the opportunity to deliver. And if she doesn't, we still challenge you to go knock on her door and ask her why. But let's try and get her in, guys, as much as we can. Those living in the areas that can vote, and us living outside, if we have influence with the guys living in that area, let's call them. Let's knock on their door physically, virtually, and tell them you need to go out and vote, and you need to tell somebody to tell somebody to tell somebody to tell somebody about the change that we want to see.
All right, thank you very much, Femi. I think you don't rub past how me for rub into what they say. But Miatta Fahnbuleh, thank you very much for joining us today. I don't know whether we'll be able to make reference. I'm not going to ask you no more question anymore, but definitely, if you not remember the name Miatta Fahnbuleh, where you don't right in front of you today, remember the name of Miatta Fahnbuleh. We sing one of the most cherishable songs, Nasalon. Femi, you want to start the tune and let me end up. Maybe start the tune, let me end up. Don't be like so. But the reason make I want to make this kind of relation, because sometimes people might be thinking, oh, I don't hear that name there before. Oh, now be musician. But yes, the original name now a musician we cut across Sierra Leone and Liberia, and one of her most popular song was Koko Ryoko. And also we'll get myself for singing this song later one day after I does it.
I don't think so.
She's relaxed and comfortable. She doesn't have to worry about nothing anymore. Nobody that can say, no, not musician. She's a well-trained economist, and definitely one of her family members was a renowned musician with a name after her, Miatta Fahnbuleh. So if you don't know the name, check online and look at Miatta Fahnbuleh. A lot of historical information will come up about the one we see done right in front of you, so, and about the one we get the original name Miatta Fahnbuleh of Koko Ryoko fame. So I want to say thank you to all the viewers for tonight's show. We're making it short today. It's not the same marathon show that we normally used to do, because Miatta has begged to just stay for an hour. We don't want for exhaust time. So until tomorrow, join us for another edition of CRJ Media Live on YouTube and Facebook, which will be normal program what they call How They Go Inside the Republic. But good thing they for talk about tomorrow. So yes, join us tomorrow at 10, and we will talk about what you need for be talked about in direct relation to Sierra Leone. So until next time, from myself and the Sarah J Media team, I want to say thank you to Miatta, and bye-bye to our viewers.
Yes, this na term for all Salon people and them party them. Sarah Media will be bringing you a variety of programs ranging from documentaries to discussions, interviews, news, views, sports, and entertainment. programs will contain matters on development, governance, the economy, and issues that are of importance to Sierra Leone. So, no left BNO because we get Beberebe program then like salon discussion, meets the ministers, the president's hour and the Gladi program. Look me, I look you. All this they start soon na www.sarahjemmedia.org. Now who's tem these?
My name is Femi Claudius Cole. I'm the chairperson for the Consortium of Progressive Political Party, we call COP, and also chairperson for Unity Party. This registration process we don't start. We get some concerns. We in a COP get concerns. The first concern we get are concerning first-time voters. First-time voters, this is not the very first experience this way they get by election business. And we want when they begin for register so today, for let them go they register and for let them go they vote, so they go. So how they experience this registration today, now you go know if next time then go come out for cancan register. Then they encounter, then they meet up beaucoup problem then. Where we want to and a beg with a beg, let them address them problem there, where them first time voters there then they meet. One, then they left them a line long. And some of them, then they college, some of them, then they school. Then, when they don't wait in a line long, they reach now for go do the registration. Then they tell them, say, they know they take, they WASC, they know they take, them Beke result, and Boku, they know agree take, them birth certificate. Now, we want for appeal to NEC. If issue they but birth certificate, let them engage with Registrar General, let them iron her out now. But if Pekin don't get in birth certificate, he don't get in certificate back from WASC or Beke, we don't understand again why then they refuse her. But then they're not done. Again, when they go bring big person from their community come verify them, then they reject them back. With the Yeri say councillors, then they reject them. This I don't get from the councillors, then safe. Say then they reject them. Chief, then they reject them. Imam, then say imam for face ID. Chairman for in area, then they reject them. So we want to really make an appeal to NEC. We already get guidelines and UDAT and how person for verify somebody will not get documentation. So we want for appeal to NEC. Let we go with waiting the book say. Let we go with waiting we been don't agree, waiting we don't talk about. If a councillor come, you not go tell and say now one person no more if for verify for the day. If that be so, that means to say now new rules then una they make us we they go along. Imam come, all man na the line don't tell you say now we imam this now we mosque. Una refuse for register the people and say because they not get ID. So this verification one become a very big issue and a very big problem. We go put the first-time voters there off completely. So before this can turn a serious problem, this first week, we dey appeal to NEC. Do ya? Una let we solve this verification issue once and for all. Not for we na free talk no more across the country. Let all man don't know say na this and this and this person na him for verify and una get that book. The one that we not get no documentation at all. Now. We all know say Sierra Leone we don't get several issues. We don't get mudslide, we don't get flooding, we don't get fire, we don't get so many disasters then. As recently as a few weeks back. People then don't lost their documentation. Somebody go on a line where they talk fluent Limba, it tell you say I don't lost something. Whether it been registered before or not, NEC, we want for big una go all out for make sure say una verify and say, yes, this person is Sierra Leonean. Yes, in chief don't verify them, una register them. The first time voter issue is a very big one. So we want to make una take that very, very seriously. And then one day we not get no documentation at all. We get an issue with una equipment. Then they call, even we own agents and don't call for say this place, they don't get power bank. They don't get power supply. The cameras then they unbog. The thumbprints machine back then they unbog. People are not able to register. We feel say these are issues that we can solve very easily. So do ya? I wonder when I put on under this process, una ensure, and even areas where would they get complaints, say people don't volunteer their own generator, personal generator, una get coordinators the way they reject them. This process now we all get them. If we all not put an under them, it not go come out successful. So do ya? We want for appeal to make. We get an issue with accommodation. By that I mean, inside the way una don't go make arrangements say, na ya people then for register, na yanda people then for register. This on behalf of the one the way they wait for register plus una self your staff. We don't observe areas the way then they face, they don't look glad for assist them. Some areas then they lock gates pan them. Christchurch is one, Boxing is one, they don't get a friendly atmosphere to una staff. So I don't know how una make una arrangements with them, but una revisit that area there because we still get a long way for go. So then areas they will get accommodation issue. I beg una address and one thing. Let we know wait till the process done, then we want for begin for cry stable roof. At the time of closing, we they observe say by 4 o'clock, despite in some centers, then don't start late, then at 4, then they close the line. Then they take only people that will get ID cards. Now, if all man don't equally left in market, don't left in school, don't left in job for counting up na line, I don't feel to say we for penalize one set of people and say, una go come back tomorrow. If una they take 50% of the one that will not get documentation, 50%, half of the one that will not get will get the ID card, una take an half. Let people not feel bad. Because this registration process, now we all get for UNAM, now we all get for Putan inside. So do you have one for appeal to NEC, that closing time, and if a center no say then don't begin late, then they extend the time for the one that we already done in a line. Then we get a good respect for people that they wait na the queue. These are some of the things that we want for Big Neck on behalf of the consortium, the people of Sierra Leone, so let them put on under the issues they are. Then I want to go back to the verification issue. Let me clarify them. Chairman of NEC, do you have a big? Clarify them publicly. Let all man know who that for able for verify person will not get documentation. When they see adults picking them where they are being rejected. Then also, there are certain areas where they say after 20, then they stop for register. Chairman, please attend to the issues there. We in a COP, we are part of the process, we embrace the process, and we want for let this stay so good before let all man able for register.
Nyaboda agbaila uma. Mongo moye pe ugama a geniji. Ko go ngiyima net TPM or INET TPM. Ko ti Malaysia be fe koma. Ko elamola sabu tumu gbawya ko mo ko egba. Ke hindanga na tiwe ma enyande. Chama mutomala. Ngibia jati ngema netumbo ko tingi ngijiwie. Nyati mana tembo alina. Tumbo be ali tembo atatu. To tumbo atatu. Tembo abaya. To nakengo ke awe ye wofe mangende tamata tatu. Sati satenga na moya na tetatu ha awe ye puima o ipuma yema. To kega ketibaya awe ye nani ma akpokovui. To na wi ake enyade. Na wi ake nunga gutuma tego tatileve fe koma. So mwayi be batigama o dai tin date yenge biama. Tia humbu tingi gila to jifa nunga gutongole tia tilave fe koma. To mwagbo umane nema daily nubeli le mali mandileima. Ke ji wi ala drejo amo mulave fe koma. Wati tia ke ya momu kwego amia kuwa mkuana anemwe. Ko ndwe eyambia ndwe iliglo. So ma be umane nema amu wasa momu live momu leze sakoma ko la sabu ko mu kwa yagwa mureje busa makoma ko yagwa balele ye kada ntifia ba yizio ba nga yigio hindagu tumava so dale mo kwa mane nema amubia mudenga mubodesia na otigwa ati ko gwa buinama fo puma wayakpa ti ata titi la be fe koma mupia delay mupia bagoma
The challenges that we confronted with in this voter registration, they're enormous. But me go and talk about one specific one. Me na a registrant will go for register na Tonkolili District Constituency 052 Ward 175. I go with me NCRA registration slip. I've been taking photo of and the 10 were verified. Then check me NIN number, me information all day. Then put me date of birth, me information all day. Then put all the unique identifiers and when they say they can put me information all day. So the constraints mean too much, except I get for try say I get me voter card, we have been used for vote 2018. Now that identification number, then that voter card 9 ECSL been get for use now and able to get me information. But the NCRA, no information about me no exist. Aside this, the center not be open quick. A lot of other challenges than they where I think say ECSL for address immediately. Otherwise, not problem for this whole registration exercise.
Afama min no PRE. Mina me de for nenwe. Ibaka muchiruras mamu salata manupasi akpap. Ka register ye ma pa a register from takabuti. Marinu imuchinu mamu napo no ko register takabuti. Kere mama nuko kakabote marinu manua fetanu kakanga so ankoi kama ko register mo bebi register amba kabot en kabota ke kabot kolo keke medere ka 2023 so marinu urnu kama nuko register afet mo ko register beti akere resulting ka beke o ka MPS o ka was mo di atipo bote ate lo maninga so mako abule won kaka register kaka ke mo yin afuma pati ma ko kaka register antu won di salata mo computer egbeti dokor kati so akoni otanatan kaka bot kere ta so obdim ta se bakasne ta so muyu ata mantederi ake mapo bempa computer tema ko de lep so mari urnu kama ko register ata ta so ye ma kama nuyo kaka atofani onko lodi marinu urnunge tenu nesai tenesa koko ba kione manu kone ma pa calculator te malome muyu kogbo kama ko register takabot yo mama salata manu so me elensi
at we know say na registration period this so we dey call all salon people dem for go register but one problem wey I don discover upon this in registration I don discover say the number where the political party observer then they get, where they take note of who that can register, where then they write. I discover say with electoral commission, their own staff, they will then put on the ground, you know, they meet with them, the number. For example, if all the party agents don't get 50 people will register for today, now electoral commission then they go there 70, 80. So one make Mohammed Kone, the chairman for NEC, make a look into this problem. We don't start so. For there, every day, the electoral commission staff them and the party agents, they all figure for be the same.
Young people then, especially we now we boku, and we will they suffer. It's like for say, all the baby problem they will they get. From we party agents, they would inform we about the registration. It's like say now, so na the northwest, so na the western area, and so na the northeast. Now they all them problems they had they come out. We know they hear better problem themselves, they come out at the other parts in the country. Now just then side they are no more. And then they worry we.
Me, I can't talk to Una for let Una go register. Una we they sell, Dove Court or any partner of the country. We say me, I know they left me business for go do registration. Do ya left farm go register? You wait the ride Okada, park Okada go register. You wait the ride keke, poda taxi, park let go register. You register, now they give you chance for let you vote. And you vote, now they change the situation where we depend on this country now. If you not register, you no go get chance for vote. And not say me, you don't know why they register, I don't know why they vote, I not see nothing. Do ya go register. If you go register, you know able to register for today, go tomorrow. If you're not able to register tomorrow, go the other day until you get chance for go register. Do ya? I also talk to Unami people in Akambia. I be then this year. I just for can't for can't talk to Una. go register. Not say we do clean me at the go na me farm. Do ya for go that farm business they left farm first, go register. This registration is very important. This now get for change your life tomorrow.
The only thing we want for say now so today, now that it's very, very important for make every citizen, whether all 18 years and above, na salon, go and register. Now you right for register, and in fact now you duty for register and vote. Every 5 years, the citizens in this country get for choose their leader. Now the only time down the way, the ordinary man at the streets, they show his own power. The power for choose the people that will lead them. And the way things don't they go in this country, owner self go agree with me that it better let you choose for yourself than you allow other people then for choose for you. So the importance of this registration exercise now for give we all the opportunity so that we all go able for exercise. We right for choose the people where we feel say go run this country in a way we go satisfy with. And that decision day now we self get for make them as individuals. We know say a lot of difficulties they don't day and problems they don't deal with the registration process so far. But me am for big owner, for be patient and for try by all means do everything possible so that we are able for register. Even though you get very important things them for do, not forget say nothing no day way more important than your life and the life we live in this country. Now this is not the only country we get, and this for many people now the only opportunity for let them show themselves say then they in charge of their own destiny. So as long as you na adult, even if na the first time you get for vote, we for tower for make up your mind, say your name go there in that book day, so that when you go vote, you no go get any problem. We dey decide how we get for live in this country. We dey decide who that for lead in this country. But you not go take part in that decision day if now you not vote. So we want for ask everybody, not only we supporters them, but even the one themselves who know they support we they ask everybody so that we will exercise we rights. Now this democracy will they try for build. Thank you very much.
The mountain in a Kabbalah, they shape like a lion. Me Jamaican body tell me say they